Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Inside Energy, a program that examines an array of issues in today's competitive energy market. Not very long ago, you really didn't have a choice when it came to electricity. When you wanted to connect service, you called the utility serving your area, they hooked you up, and then they sent you bills based on the amount of electricity you used. Periodically, that utility would ask a state regulatory body for a rate increase, and it was at that time that you could voice your opinion. But really, that was about the only option you had. Well, the world has changed dramatically. Every single one of you watching right now has a choice of who will supply your electricity. There is competition, and the aim is to provide customers with the products and services they want, and through a competitive process, give customers their best opportunity to lower their electricity costs. But most importantly, the control is much more directly in your hands. You can pick and choose, and you can change. Today we're going to talk about how this new world of electricity works. Joining me to discuss today's topic, Electricity 101, are two guests who've spent much of their lives working in the world of regulated and unregulated electricity. Maureen Helmer and Paul Alfonso. Maureen has been involved in energy issues for more than 25 years. She chaired the New York Public Service Commission at the time when New York was working to bring competition to its electricity markets. Today, she continues to be involved in energy as a lawyer with Hiscock and Barclay in Albany, New York. Paul has been involved in energy issues for the past couple of decades. He served as the general counsel and chairman of the Massachusetts Public Utilities Commission during a period when Massachusetts restructured its electricity markets to permit full competition and choice in the energy sector. He continues to work in competitive markets as chairman of Brown Rudnick's Government Law and Strategies Group in Boston. Maureen and Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
How does today's restructured energy market work, Maureen?
Well, it's a lot of what you just talked about is still the case. You still get bills from your utility, you still have your electricity measured by your utility, but instead of the utility being out there producing all of the electricity, we have a number of competitors who do that. They sell into a competitive market, and then we have a series of competitive energy service companies that sell that electricity to consumers if they choose not to buy it from their local utility.
So you have a lot of different choices then as far as who you want to supply your electricity.
You do, and that information is all very handily accessible on the website, both through in New York State at askpsc.com and through a number of other venues. Paul, I know there's websites in your state as well.
That's right, and even in Massachusetts and New England, we've got mass.gov/DPU, and that'll link up to all the options. It'll give you the name of the suppliers, how to contact them, and a very, very seamless way to do it. And I think, choice ultimately is a cornerstone of the American way, and we feel rather strongly that customers and consumers want to have the ability to choose. You can think of the typical utility company runs the infrastructure, and the commodity, that energy, it can be bought from a variety of choices. And so it's exciting times for consumers these days.
Good. And by the way, if you missed those websites, we will be repeating them before the end of the program. How much competition is there in every particular area? Does, for example, if you have a utility serving a particular footprint on a map, is it the same independent energy suppliers who are competing within that, or does one little hunk of a utility have some and another hunk of a that same utility's territory have more or different ones?
There is some variation geographically based on metropolitan areas, geographic areas, and again, the websites that we talked about, what you can do is plug in your zip code or your area code, depending on the website that you're dealing with, and they'll tell you exactly which providers are serving that area in terms of electricity.
Mm-hmm. How many folks have actually taken advantage of this? How many in New York? How many in Connecticut? How many in Massachusetts?
I think in Massachusetts we're on the 400,000 range, which is very impressive. In Connecticut, 490,000, 400,000 in the Connecticut area. And what's even more exciting is it's a combination of real families making those choices, as well as companies and smaller businesses making those choices. So it's a combination of different sectors of the economy. One of the things we work together as regulators, I never like to say that we follow New York, being from Massachusetts, but the reality is New York has been such a great leader, and we have followed many of the best practices here in New York and in the sector, that people ultimately have that ability to choose. One of the things we're always concerned about is it easy for the consumer? Because if it's not, they won't do it. We have enough things to do during the day, but the reality is we all have our phones and our PDAs, and we do that every day. We make a choice as to which supplier we want to have our wireless cell phone. It's that easy. The ability to go, talk, get a quote, and seamlessly make a choice. It's not difficult, rather easy.
You mentioned Massachusetts and Connecticut, New York, Maureen?
And in New York, about 1.2 million customers have switched. Again, there are differences between different types of customers. The first customers to really take advantage of this were large commercial and industrial customers, but a large number of residential customers now have begun to do so, and largely through the efforts of the public service commissions in the various states that have created these websites, as well as the energy service companies that are working with them to bring information to consumers.
Still, when you're talking in New York's case, 1.2 million, and you figure upstate and New York City, there's still a lot of people who could take advantage of this, right?
Absolutely, but in the meantime, the utilities are still there to provide service to customers, and as folks get more comfortable with this over time and understand the services available, it's not just about price. It's about what kinds of services, environmental services, energy efficiency services. As the smart grid becomes more and more pervasive throughout the state and the country, and you have more sophisticated information networks hooked up to our energy supply, you're going to see more and more products. Comparing it to the telecommunications situation, we used to have black phones. That was your choice. You went to your utility, you got a black phone. But as competition came in and innovation came in, all kinds of new services became available.
And that started many, many years ago, decades ago, compared to the choice for electricity. So where in telephone parlance, where are we in the progression? Are we just at the colored phone point now rather than the black phone, or are we further down the road?
We're not quite at the cell phone and the broadband stage yet, but we're somewhere in between, because a lot of investment still has to be made to bring the sophistication in the data services and so forth into this. But you can already see it, as you did in the telephone side, with small companies or parts of large companies, large international companies coming in and starting to make the investment in the software, in the infrastructure. You're going to see more and more of these things available.
Yeah, and that's an exciting part of this whole issue, is not only the ability of getting a price and being competitive about that, but the technology component of this. One can imagine, we have our PDAs, we're looking at our cell phones, the ability to empower the consumer to know how much he or she's using at home, when to control things from a remote center, and the ability to do that. Customers are used to doing that now. We look at these phones and we have all these applications. The reality is that's going to be a powerful tool to manage the load, to manage how much we want to pay and when we want to pay. And that's going to become second nature, and I think very exciting.
And that is yet in the future. That's the future world.
But the future is almost here, right? In what we're doing, the reality is there are many smart grid pilot programs throughout the country now that enable customers to get this information and act on it. It's like anything else. When we get comfortable with it, we're all going to be doing it.
On this day today, what has the restructured energy market done for consumers?
Well, aside from bringing choices and introducing these innovations, it has also, in terms of the entire, from soup to nuts, from the place that the electricity is generated to the point at which it is delivered to the customer, it has provided much more competition and therefore efficiency into the system and reliability into the system. In terms of the consumer, it's really, and Paul has said this before, it puts the power in your hands to make decisions not just about where you buy your power, but how you use your power and what kinds of tools and services you purchase for that power.
And what about reliability? How has all of this restructuring had an impact on reliability? Has it?
Well, there's many kinds of reliability, but there's the reliability of the whole system, and the investments that have been made in the whole system have brought, I believe, not only more efficiency but more reliability. But in terms of you and I as a consumer, when we worry about the reliability to our home and who's there if the tree falls on the power line and we don't have electricity or we have a dangerous situation, you're still in the hands of your local utility, who has always come. The same folks who have lived in your community and delivered that service for years will still be at your house if you have problems with your electricity.
But what about further down the pipeline, or further more toward the beginning of the pipeline, the source of the electricity? Has this competition changed that rather than the utility having its set power plants?
I think it's fair to say, and we do a lot of analysis back home in terms of public opinion polls, and it is fair to say that when restructuring in the 96, 97 time frame till today has had a positive effect in terms of more investment in the system, meaning more generation facilities, different companies coming into the areas. And I remember this profoundly when we all went through the 2003 blackout. We in back home, part of the reason that we were not affected and were able, very fortunate that way, we had plenty of extra capacity in the system. So we were able to manage it a lot better. So I know that was a difficult period in terms of the whole region, but we came through it in part because of the choices and the ability to manage the system back home in New England. And I think ultimately you see new investment, you see different companies, and it's economic development as well in terms of the ability of translating, which shouldn't be lost in these difficult economic times, translating different companies, different competitors. That does equal jobs on the ground here in this region as well as back home.
And not necessarily jobs that would be in any way government supported. Those are private sector jobs. Not
that there's anything wrong with government jobs. I want to make that point.
I didn't say there was. I just making the point.
That's right.
All right. As a resident or as a business, walk me through the process of choosing. I right now, the hypothetical pay a utility. And I just get my bill once a month, I pay it, and boom, that's the end of it. How do I shop for an independent?
Well, I think you just named one of the key things, which is pick up your bill. And the bill that you have from your local utility has all of the information you need to shop. And you go to the website, whether it's askpsc.com or one of the Connecticut or Massachusetts sites, and follow the steps there. And they will tell you who the various folks are that you can call. It will give you contact information, whether it's by email or by telephone. When you call, the basic information you need, your account information, your location information, the bill shows you if there's a meter, the meter information. You'll provide that information to the folks that you talk to on the phone.
The independent supplier.
The independent suppliers, and ask a lot of basic questions, the same questions you would ask if you, say, have an oil tank and you have to buy oil. Obviously you're going to ask about the price. Is the price flat? Is it fixed? Does it vary? How much does it vary? How long is the term of the contract? What happens if you leave that contract early? Is there a penalty? A lot of people with cell phones find out very quickly when they terminate their contract earlier and they get that $175 bill that there may be things attached to it. So there has to be a lot of notice up front by the provider about any termination provisions. And any other questions, ask what kinds of programs are out there, what incentives are out there. There's a referral program in New York which provides a 7% reduction in your bill simply for switching for a period of time. Ask them what kinds of incentives are out there. Paul, what am I forgetting?
No, well, I think one of the things that are important on the bill is it really is user-friendly, which I think in comparison to years past was not always the case. But you can look at your consumption. What did you use the month before, the previous month, which is helpful in deciding what you may or may not want to do. But it is clear, it's pretty straightforward, and if people take a few minutes of their busy day, it'll pay dividends. And again, we've done many studies in this area in terms of public opinion polling. People want to save money. Every dollar counts. So the ability to get a good deal or a better deal is well worth the effort.
And I understand there are also options of fixed price versus variable price. So I can buy, let's say I sign a contract for a year. I could buy my electricity at a set fixed price for that entire year? Is that how that works?
In part, companies have different programs, but we have found that many customers want a budget.
Right.
They want to be able to say, even though it's X, it'll be more during these months or these other months, but if I can flatten it out for the 12-month period, that will help me with my budget.
It's like the utility budget plans.
That's right, and that's
that's
a powerful tool in the sense of being able to count on your budgeting and do it appropriately. That's one of the options.
What about in this day and age of trying to be more green, more environmentally friendly? How has this whole restructuring had an impact on that, or has it?
Good point, Jack. There are customers who are very interested in purchasing electricity from green sources, and there are companies that are out there that advertise specifically with respect to that. There are programs that have been set up by the states that measure to make sure that these companies really are purchasing their electricity from either renewable or clean or whatever the various programs are that are out there. And assure the customers that if someone comes to their door and says, we're going to sell you green electricity, that it really does come from green sources.
Yeah, there's a lot of integrity in the process there, and regulators, I think, have done a very nice job of making sure that we can measure that, in fact, it is a green source, be it a wind farm here in New York or in Maine, where have you. But again, it's all about choice. There are consumers, and more so, day in and day out, that green is a value. And whether it's a little more expensive or not, they intelligently will make that affirmative choice. And again, it's that back to choice, the ability to do that. And that's exactly what we've found, particularly in Massachusetts and throughout New England, that there's a core constituency, and it grows every day, that green is important to them for a variety of reasons.
I would imagine this day and age, it definitely is the case. All right, I decide to go with an independent. I have picked somebody. What do I need from them? What should I have to make sure that it is a good, solid business deal?
Well, you will get a welcome package from them, assuming you've made your selection. You'll get a welcome package from them which has information about your program and so forth. From that point on, depending on where you are, many of the companies will provide their bill right as part of your main bill. On my bill, if I go to page 3, it's got all the information about what my competitive provider is providing me, how much of my bill is coming through that part, and I will continue to have information about how to contact them if I have a problem, and really they are the people you should come to first if you have a question about that part of your bill. And failing that, if you have issues, if you have difficulties, you can always go to your local public utility company and call them as well if you have a complaint.
And what should I look for in the contract?
Well, in the contract, the typical in terms of where that price, any termination issues, so you know in terms of the time and what commitment you've made, because typically there's a fair price, but there's a commitment on the other side in terms of how long you're going to be a customer. And again, I would say it's absolutely seamless. The reality is when Maureen sends the check in, there's one check, it goes in and it gets paid. That amount gets paid. So you're not worried about who's doing what to whom. It gets paid, it gets done easily, but you have made an affirmative choice of a supplier at that point.
But in some cases you'll get both the delivery from the delivery charge from the utility, your old standby utility, and a separate bill for the supply.
I think that might be in some regions,
in
some places that's absolutely right. Back home in Massachusetts it's in one bill, but in some locales there too.
Okay, I make the switch. I sign my name on the dotted line. The new company takes over for supply. What changes, what stays the same?
The beauty of this is that very, very little changes, in the sense that you have your utility that has the infrastructure, they keep the transmission facilities going, you get your electricity in there, and the reality is your lights stay on, you've made a different choice, and hopefully you've saved a bit of money, you've made a good relationship with a new company, and so very little will change, and that's part of the message. Very little will change. Now, if you had some opportunities in terms of some of the other service we talked about, in terms of technology, in terms of demand side response, the ability to gauge how much usage, some of those technologies will be new to you and could be something you choose depending on the company.
Okay. And then is there anything other than the bill, really, or the potential for two bills that is different?
No, it really is not, because if for whatever reason something happens to that supplier, it goes out of business, it leaves the state, what have you, you still have the ability to go back to your utility. It's an expression we refer to as provider of last resort. No matter what happens, you will have somebody to provide your electricity. So from a reliability perspective, I mean, I think we would make the argument that the overall system is more reliable, but in terms of your interface with your local utility, it's exactly the same. In terms of the options that are available, there may be some more options, there may be some more services. But in terms of your ability to get electricity when you need it, at the moment you flick on that switch, nothing has really changed.
Yeah, and the other thing I think it's important for our viewing audience to know is that the suppliers, the independents as we've called them, that are offering this, these are large, good corporate citizens. These are not small fly-by-night operators. These are very solid corporate citizens that many of them, some larger than others, granted, and some boutiques in the region, but others are national presence. Some are very heavy in the region, and these are names and corporate citizens that we've all heard of and know, and you'll see the list when you go into the PUC websites.
So rather than in the old days where I could say, cool, I'm getting my electricity from Niagara Falls, I could also say I'm getting my electricity from Montana or Arizona or whatever.
Well, I'll let the engineer part of that whole discussion. That's another show.
I only play one
we're only lawyers. Where these molecules and neutrons are coming from, we'll take a pass on that. But the bottom line is that switch comes on, it's going to work.
It's going to work, and I would imagine if you have a national company, that gives that national company many more resources for finding what they need to supply you.
These are corporate citizens who have lessons learned from the different regions. I think that's a real upside too. They work in different markets and apply best practices, and like anything else, we keep refining, we keep learning, and making it better for the customer all over the country.
How's the sales process work? I know I get letters periodically or offers periodically from independent electricity and, in my case, natural gas suppliers, but we're just talking electricity at this point. How does the sales process work?
It can be any of the forms that you see in other markets, such as telecommunications. It can be telemarketing. There's some door-to-door sales that's taking place. The do not call registry is in place, so if you don't like getting telecommunications calls on these kinds of things, you're not going to get them from these kinds of providers. I see a lot of mail. I see a lot of hard mail coming into my mailbox about these kinds of services.
Which is usually what I get too.
And I like that, Jack, because when you do get a hard piece of paper, it usually has a nice amount of information. They usually have the websites listed that you can go on to at the Public Service Commission to kind of verify that, yeah, this is a real entity in my jurisdiction, and this is somebody that I can trust. And you can get complaint information on the website. So you will get the kinds of marketing that you get from, a telephone company or any other kind of provider.
Yeah, that's been my experience in terms of that mail that comes in, and that's pretty powerful because you can do your own due diligence. You still have to be a smart consumer in any of these choices we make in life, and this is no exception. And the reality is, you look at that, and there's usually some nice comparative information, and it's pretty clear. In English, very user-friendly, and a number, or you can return it, but a number to have someone on the other end ask some questions and feel comfortable about the choice.
And I know we keep coming back to the website, but I don't want to underemphasize how valuable it is. If you're buying oil, you basically either go into the telephone book, or you call your neighbor, or you get a recommendation. There are very few commodities you can get on a website.
On a website,
have them show you all the folks that are out there. All these people are registered with your local public utility commission. They have to go through a certain process to verify that they are, real, honest to goodness companies that can provide these services. There's a set of protections above and beyond, what you have in certain other types of private commodities that protect your rights and to make sure that you get the kind of notice about termination clauses and so forth. So it really is a very, very powerful shopping tool.
That's a good
go
point.
ahead, Paul.
I would say that's a very good point that Maureen mentions, that similar to New York, back in Massachusetts and throughout New England, when these companies want to do business, they register with us, and there's a protocol of minimum assurances they need to make. So there's been a cut at the regulators saying, a company meets these minimum requirements, and now you consumer can make the choice, but here's a list that you can choose from, and that's an important, it should give some comfort to consumers as well.
All right, now Maureen, I know you've already let the cat out of the bag that you have an independent energy supplier for your home. How did you go through the process of picking? Had you gotten your electricity before from the neighborhood utility? And what is it that prompted you in your personal life to make the change?
Well, I started doing it when I was chair of the PSA, and frankly, I did it as a personal laboratory to see how hard it was, and I never had a problem. I subsequently moved into, a little bit closer to Albany. And at that point, I started to get the mail that everybody else gets, and I started to look at the individual sheets that I got from this company and that company. But then at that point, I got on the website and I looked at all the companies that were available, and I have my own personal preferences about how much stability I want versus how much money I want to save, and the various things that we all take into consideration. All those personal preferences are different, and based on those preferences, I chose a company, and I've been happy ever since.
And does each company have like a varying amount of time in a contract? Can you have it as short as a month? Can you have it are some only a year? Are some 5 years? How does that work?
It does vary, and a lot of that again is the interchange between how much stability you want versus
Right.
not. If you're looking for a very stable product for a fairly long period of time, obviously the contract is going to be a longer term contract. If that's not as important to you, then there'll be a company that will provide a shorter contract.
And I guess some of that would involve how long you expect to stay in a particular area too.
Part of it, and also your risk tolerance. How maybe I just want to check this guy out before I I sign up for a longer term contract. There's all kinds of personal decisions that go into that.
Okay, Paul.
Well, it's funny. Maureen was chair of the commission here. I did the same back home. Was to sort of, I've been preaching in terms of competition. I figured, well, I should be an example of it, and I did the same thing. And I wanted to test, in particular, among other things, how seamless was it easy. I'd been preaching this, and the conclusion, it was a quick conversation. I had the comparison, and I locked it in for a year, and it was a very good experience and very easy. Very straightforward. Saved a few dollars, and it was the right thing to do. It was easy.
And I guess too, in all of this discussion, even though we're talking about independent suppliers, a perfectly valid choice is not changing anything.
If that's exactly, and that is a choice, right? That's a choice to do that. But it's it shouldn't be a default choice. It should be a choice in the sense of you've had the information, you've taken a few minutes to look at it, and you're comfortable with that. Simply because you don't want to spend a couple of minutes to do it, you may be missing, and I would suggest you're likely missing a possibly good opportunity.
Okay, just a minute left. Any final thoughts?
I defer to my New York.
Just what Paul said. Take advantage of it. It's not hours of your time. It's minutes of your time. It's getting on the phone with somebody who will answer your questions. Take the couple of minutes to find out what your options are, and then if you choose to stay with utility, that's fine. That's what it's there for. It's there to provide service when you're not interested in going someplace else, but take the time to shop.
Okay, and the good starting point for all of you is the websites in New York. It's www.askpsc.com, and then click on Power to Choose, and that will list all of the utilities in a given area. For Connecticut, it's ctenergyinfo.com. Maureen and Paul, thank you both very much for joining us today. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate your participation. Have yourself a great day.